Zihard, if you can keep my timing correct. No, he's not here. Keep me on time, please. We have a ton of questions. I don't know, I hope we can get through them all, so I'm going to ask our panelists to be detailed, but as fast as possible, so we can answer all the questions, hopefully. They came in a kind of a cluster, so hopefully I can group them and make sure we answer them. So one of the consistent questions is around, it's for Gordon, and it's around feed mitigation. I think you noticed when you presented that this was a topic that actually a lot of our audience were not very familiar with. And so there's a couple of questions from the audience around what exactly is feed mitigation in terms of what you add to the feed, why maybe you started doing this, what was the data behind, just I know it's a big subject, but, and then maybe just a kind of an indication of costs, right? Because that was a question too. Are we talking about 10 euros a ton or 100 euros a ton?
Sure, thank you. It's an excellent question. The history goes back to the PED introduction to the United States, 2013. Before that time, the virus had never been found in our swine herds. So the field observation on our farms was that this virus was clearly moving around in different ways than we had normally observed. And so we soon concluded and found that virus in our feed on farms where the virus was reported. So immediately upon finding that observation, we determined to confirm if that in fact was a true finding, if it was a contaminant and so we did that. Scott D led that, Dr. D led that effort. Then immediately knowing that we not only found PED, but in our continued research, we found PRRS virus. So in the case of both, we then started the discovery process of the interventions put in place to lower the virus found in feed. Basically their acidification and there's a number of different products. There's products, I don't know if they're available in Europe or not, but products both in Asia and in North America. There's 3 or 4 commercial vendors that provide these products. Basically $2 to $6 a ton would be a very common, and so it's a common, for sure, seasonal addition to our sow diets. We occasionally will, in high risk areas, we'll place it in our wean to finish markets.
Okay. And do you say it's usually an organic acid or some?
Correct. Each manufacturer has their own formula, that it could be a combination of organic acids or maybe one singular acid. But there's many suppliers out there that if you contact one of us, we can get you the contact.
Good. And the other issue I think is around the detection or the data showing that PRRS survives quite well in some common ingredients in rations for quite a while at room temperature even, right?
That's exactly right. So again, our observation of that virus moving between sites that with no commonality other than the source of the feed source led us to go down the path of not only the feed being positive, but which specific ingredient would allow that virus, both PED and PRRS, to survive longer. So those publications are out there. It's published data. We're happy to share those if anyone has interest.
Great, thank you. Very, very detailed and succinct answer. I think hopefully that covers the feed topic. We also had quite a number of questions around the topic of gilt vaccination with PRRS MLV vaccine. These are some addressed to Clayton, but everybody can answer. And they're a little bit around what sort of protocol would you propose for gilts? And I know you'll probably say it depends, but what would be a standard gilt program, and including quarantine? If you're bringing in, say, a gilt into the herd, how would you manage that in terms of timing of vaccination, cool down period, etc.? If you could briefly cover that topic.
Really emphasize briefly with me, Oliver. No. Okay, so this one is pretty straightforward. You should always isolate and quarantine your gilts before they come into your sow farm. That typically is a 3 to 8 week process. Minimum 3 weeks, but for reasons of flow, sometimes a little bit longer. I prefer to keep the gilts naive at that point. If they're delivered naive, I keep the isolation in the quarantine area naive. Maybe unique situations where it depends, but for the most part, keep it naive because the testing is very straightforward. I can do ELISA, I can do PCR, and I expect negative results all the time. Immediately after those gilts are released from the isolation or quarantine, we vaccinate them immediately, regardless of the age or weight that they come in. Most common is a full dose of PRRS MLV, often given with combination with circovirus vaccine, mycoplasma vaccine, and twice, 30 days apart from each other.
And between vaccination and time to use those gilts, how long do you wait, ideally?
I don't. So if you have a situation where you're bringing in adult gilts that are at breeding age, obviously your quarantine needs to be on the shorter end of the 3 to 8 week period. But I have situations, to be honest with you, I have producers that don't have an isolation, don't have a quarantine. They bring in naive gilts into a farm that is stage 2 vaccinated, and we vaccinate those gilts as they come into the gestation because that's the first place they come in and live at the farm. And if they're breeding weight and they come into heat and the farm needs to make breed target, you know what they do. They breed those gilts. And we don't see any sort of a horrible impact to the performance of those gilts.
The key is that the sow farm is stable. There isn't a massive circulation of wild-type virus.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biology would say younger is better. And if you can have a wean to finish GDU and you can vaccinate those gilts at 25 kilos, fantastic. They've got all the time in the world to recover. But if you don't, you still need to vaccinate them.
Yeah. I think in Europe in particular, we often struggle to know the status of the gilts when they come to the herd, or they are positive, but we don't know if that's still active or a previous exposure. So that's often the dilemma when the pigs arrive. Thank you. I think that answered the question very correctly and very quickly. Thank you. And if you still have questions, we do have a microphone, so we can make it live. But I'll keep going until you shout, "Hey, I have a question." We're also talking a little bit about gilts, and don't know who this is for, anybody really, but we normally talk a lot about herd closure, and we didn't have time today to cover that big important topic. But the question from the audience was, how many gilts do you normally load into a herd when you start the herd closure? And there may be another depends question, but could you help us, guide us, how people are managing that? And as a follow-up question, I know, Lance, we've looked at some of the cost benefit of that whole herd closure impact from parity, et cetera. So maybe the follow-up question would be for Lance. Daniel or Clayton, I don't know who, or Gloria. Gilt loading.
I think we're all saying as many of them as we can. Don't leave any space empty in the farm. Everywhere you can put a gilt, put a gilt. If you need a week or two to cull out some older parity sows to bring more gilts in, do it. But don't leave any empty space in the farm before you close it.
So clean up let's say the culls or the challenge animals and bring as many as you can.
Yep.
The lame sows, the sows that you don't expect them to last for another couple parities, you want to make sure that give them opportunity for them to be cold, and then you bring the gilts instead to fill that gap.
So waiting a little bit may not be a bad idea to ensure that you can load up the farm with gilts.
Most farms that fail, they fail because they give up. They fail because they run out of gilts and they feel that pain of missing breed target, and they give up. They don't stay disciplined to stay with the process. So yeah, if you need a couple of weeks to make sure we have more gilts, so we run out of gilts later, then do it.
It's a matter of planning, right? You know that you're going to be closed you plan for almost a year. If it's before, good for you. But what if you don't have the gilts for that space? There's something called the off-site GDU, right? Where you can make sure that those gilts are being on development and acclimated and immunized as you plan off-site. But then even though they're geographically off-site, you consider them as a part of the herd.
Okay. Good. And Daniel, you put together kind of a model which we've shared a couple of times around the cost-benefit ratio around herd closure. And I think we now have this dilemma with some of these very pathogenic strains. Do we just skip that and go directly to depop? these are tough decisions, right? Cash flow, it's probably too complicated, but you have a model to sort of help understand the benefit of herd closure. Do you want to briefly share kind of the highlights of that?
Yeah, I can always put Lance on the spot. Where's Lance? There he is. He can talk more about the specifics, but the long story short is we expect, based on comparing herds that did and didn't, that herds that implemented the herd closure and whole herd immunization protocol, they achieve stability sooner, and they will have a less severe total production losses compared to herds that keep introducing susceptible gilts in. And so based on that, there will be a significant return of investment to justify herd closure, and I guess that's why most people will do it. We'll go toward eliminating the wild type. Then if you want to eliminate the vaccine virus, that's a different discussion, but you for sure want to make sure you are producing negative pigs as soon as you can. Lance, what did I miss?
You know, I think one of the important things with it, and this is actually a great project I worked on with Marika and Dr. Tom Gillespie, is we were able to look at some of the economic costs of herd closure. You close the herd, and so the idea was we're disrupting the parity structure through closure by not allowing the introduction of new animals. Is that going to present a big cost? And kind of the context of where this came from was we wanted to understand the cost of a disease on a farm that closed the herd. So we had to separate the two, the impact of the disease from the impact that closing the herd had. And what we found was that closing the herd and causing that disruption, there was an impact, anytime you disrupt the parity structure like that, but that surplus of gilts goes on to become a surplus of parity 2, parity 3, very productive animals, which help kind of mitigate that cost associated with disrupting the parity structure. And so the actual cost, apart from front loading in all those gilts, is pretty minor. And so if cost is a big concern to closing the herd, I would say don't let it be as much of a concern because that disruption to parity structure is not as severe as you think it might be.
Good, thank you. Tom, I have a question for you related a little bit around your topic and the sort of around elimination of disease. You're working at a state level to try and eliminate certain diseases that are, and the question came from the audience. I thought it was a really interesting one, and perhaps with no perfect answer, but psychologically, is it better to stay in this kind of control mode, underperform but nothing spectacular, or go for elimination, and then 3 years later you have a breakdown, right? And we know now with MHIO, with PRRS, there is a certain probability of breaking. And how does that affect the psychology of the workers, of the owners of the farm? And maybe not just Tom, but...
No, I think it's a really good question because I believe that people are really our biggest barrier to implementing programs that are going to make our herd health stay the way we want it to. So if psychologically there's issues going on that cause them to decrease their performance, that's significant. I think the way around that, though, is to make sure there's cross-training going on and that people in production understand the significance of what they're doing and what has in other areas. So for instance, farrowing people know what's going on in the grower finisher, and they see the benefits of having those negative pigs in that elimination program. And if the break is occurring, we've talked about breaks occurring 1.5, 2 years later again. Lance can tell us about the economic impact of that and how it's still much better that way. So education is really critical there of making sure they get that. And then I think when it's happening, there needs to be a lot of empathy with the staff and understanding what they're going through and the emotional distress that they're going through and helping them through that distress when it happens. So they realize that there's still a game here, an endpoint game that is better for production and better for the pigs on a long-term basis than living with that disease.
Anybody want to add? Or I think it was a very So, comprehensive answer. Yeah, good, good. We're running out of time. I think I have maybe time for one more. I have to go through my list. I have one that I think we'll leave for the beer break because it was how to eliminate influenza virus. We'll put it on the list for the future perspectives. But it's more a clarification question, Clayton, around you talk about do you want to have antibodies or not have antibodies? And the audience member was asking, what do you mean by antibodies? Do you mean IgG? Do you mean neutralizing antibodies? I think it's a clarification about how you use them more to describe, I think, the herd status rather than a protection status. But maybe you can clarify that for the audience.
Yeah, I'm not referencing any specific type of immunity. You want to have had exposure to PRRS that results in a pretty rapid response of, for sure, serum neutralizing antibodies, but also the T cell antibodies, right? You want cell-mediated approach, and you ultimately want to neutralize the virus in the bloodstream as fast as possible, but I don't necessarily have a specific antibody or a test I use to quantify that in a practical basis.
It's more an approach, right? A maintain immunity approach versus a go naive.
Yeah, we know naive, the pig takes a long time to respond. I mean, PRRS is a wonderful Trojan horse virus, and the ELISA is a great example, right? Response to the nucleocapsid protein on the virus means nothing. Beautiful on a diagnostic assay, sick animals for a long time. Serum neutralizing antibodies take more like, up to 42 days, I think, to be developed. That's a sick animal for 42 days. That's a long time to wait. So let's get that process fast forwarded so that the immune system can hit print on more antibodies when they do see that PRRS virus come in.
Thank you. I think that's
Oliver, just I have a question here. Yes, question for the panel of experts. If you had a free of charge doses for the PRRS vaccine, what would you choose to vaccinate? Sows or piglets?
Well, in the U.S., the PRRS vaccines are free, so is that not? In Europe, it's different?
unfortunately.
We can just select sows or piglets?
You just have to choose sows or piglets. What would you choose in order to control this?
I would start by saying the ones that are going to get infected with PRRS. Right, so if it's a one-site farm, a farrow-to-finish farm, then that's complicated. But in segregated production, a lot of times the sows may be in a better location, right? And the growing pigs may be going to a very pig-dense area. And in that situation, there are a lot of farms that have maybe stage 4 naive sows, but those growing pigs go into a middle of the area where they're going to get barraged with virus. The opposite could theoretically be true, and the sow farm is the highest risk component. So whichever farm I thought was going to get infected with a new strain of PRRS first, that would be the one that I would vaccinate.
Any other option?
I can only answer what we do today. We do both. Every one of our sow farms is vaccinated. Every one of our wean pigs is vaccinated. 100%.
Don't compromise.
Don't cut corners, Sebas.
Any other questions for the audience before we wrap it up? I think really I want to very much thank you for your participation, your attention, your questions, great questions, and very much I think we should all thank in the magician style the presenters today. Thank you.